In Fallout 4, there exists a wide variety of weapons you can choose to use as you adventure through the Commonwealth and take down the unrelenting threats within. These can range from laser weapons, heavy weapons, shotguns, and even melee weapons. Truly, when it comes to picking your playstyle, the game doesn't shy away from giving you an abundance of choice. Some of these weapons are unlocked later into the game as you progress deeper and deeper into the map itself, completing more difficult challenges and being rewarded with more deadly weapons. However, the weapon type we're going to be discussing today is the one weapon type you actually have access to right from the start of the game. In this video, we're going to be looking at the humble pipe weapon and how I personally think it blatantly misses the mark as a starting weapon type. Today, we're looking at pipe weapons within Fallout 4 and what could have been. Now, quickly before the video starts, I just want to say that subscribing is a free way to support the channel. It lets me know what type of content you guys like, and it lets you guys know when I upload videos. So yeah, if you enjoy the content, make sure to subscribe. And without further ado, enjoy. It is pretty common for video games to start off with a somewhat humble beginning, and with that humble beginning usually comes somewhat of a pathetic excuse for a weapon. You know what I'm talking about. Like starting with a rusty, rundown iron longsword in Fable, the USC sidearm in Doom 2016, or even the short supply of weapons you receive at the beginning of Left 4 Dead 2. You're always handed these puny, rundown weapons at the start of the game, as the areas you first explore inhabit somewhat feeble enemies, giving the player a chance to adjust to their surroundings before diving into the game entirely. Fallout games are no different to this. In Fallout 2, you start with a small handcrafted tribal spear, which is only good enough to get you through the first few areas of the game before eventually needing an upgrade. In New Vegas, you're handed a short supply of scraps, depending on your build, with the only concrete weapon being that of the varmint rifle, which eventually you will replace, but the point being is for the first few areas of the game, you're given basically trash.
But Jabo, that's where you're wrong, because you can start New Vegas with a mercenary grenade rifle with the DLC installed.
Yeah, I'm talking about the base game only here, okay? The DLCs is cheating, I guess. I don't know. The point still stands. In any Fallout game, you are basically handed the worst weapons you can find at the start of the game, because eventually you're going to find better ones as you venture out into the wastes. In Fallout 4's case, the game hands you two weapons within Vault 111, a security baton and a 10mm pistol. Now, the security baton is pretty much just a stick. It's basically a generic melee weapon that is fairly redundant the moment you step outside. But the 10mm pistol, now that weapon can carry you through a good chunk of the entire game. The 10mm pistol is a fairly strong weapon. You can upgrade it a lot and spec into its damage through the skills tab. It can become either one of two weapons, a short-range submachine gun that chews through bullets at an alarming rate but causes death by basically 1,000 paper cuts, or you can make the 10mm pistol a one-tap god that, once combined with the stealth system, can eliminate basically a majority of foes in one single tap. The 10mm pistol is surprisingly versatile, but today's video is not on this iconic Fallout weapon. No, today we're discussing the pipe weapons and their place within Fallout 4. You might be able to see where this is going. Now, like mentioned before, pipe weapons are seen right outside the vault of Fallout 4, and they usually consume some of the more common ammo types found across the wasteland, this being either the .38 round, the .45 round, or the .308 round. You're not going to struggle to find these ammo types as you play the game, and they essentially serve the purpose of being an introductory weapon that you're provided with at the start of your adventure. They're basically provided this very generic ammo types because at the start of the game, when you're first adjusting to the combat and surroundings, the last thing the player needs as an obstacle is that of ammo management, which I personally think Bethesda did right in Fallout 4's case. As you explore Sanctuary, you're guaranteed to find a pipe weapon or two, and everywhere that there's raiders, they're almost guaranteed again to have pipe weapons. Hell, even the super mutants towards the center of the map are still using pipe weapons around Diamond City. So why is it, when I asked you guys which starting weapon you chose to use, that only 5% of you guys favored that of the pipe weapon? Well, it's kind of because the game hands you a better weapon before you even find one. Like I said, you're handed a 10mm pistol in Vault 111, and this weapon just has way better damage than that of any pipe weapon. It's somewhat of a joke that the game goes out of its way to set up this really cool weapon type system that is basically only useful at the start of the game, which also has a very robust crafting system that has this very unique style to it, and all for it to be basically trumped before you even leave the vault. I can't help but feel, just like the Museum of Freedom set piece that I discussed in a previous video, it feels like the 10mm pistol was added in after the fact to make the game feel like it has a faster, more brief-paced start. Because without the 10mm pistol in your hands, you first have to use a melee weapon to clear out the vault, that being the security baton, before you eventually find a rundown and tacky pipe weapon capable of firing these really shoddy rounds whilst exploring Sanctuary with Codsworth. Essentially what I'm trying to say is that if you take away the 10mm pistol from the player at the start of the game, you'd have to use these terribly handcrafted weapons that are scattered around because you have no other choice. By forcing the player to use the pipe weapons, not only are you actually making them take advantage of the system that clearly people have worked hard on implementing, but you're also making the player look out for better weapons as they maneuver through the game. But unfortunately, this kind of doesn't exist, because the player is given a 10mm pistol at the start, which, like I said, is a very strong weapon that can carry you through almost the entire game. By doing this, sure, the combat is arguably better at the start of the game, but you aren't incentivizing the player to explore and find better weapons. At least not for a good while. Now, before you leave me a steaming comment about how the 10mm pistol is vital towards the pre-war aesthetic of the vault and it's law-friendly, blah blah blah, I just want to clarify that I'm not questioning the spawning of the 10mm from a setting or law point of view, because it makes complete sense. Of course a pre-war weapon would exist in a vault that was around pre-war, and of course the Overseer would have one or two of these weapons. However, from a combat gameplay perspective, a better solution would have been to place the 10mm inside of the small Overseer cage next to the Overseer's terminal, but have the door be locked by maybe an expert lock, meaning the player is aware of the existence of the iconic weapon, but unfortunately they must return to it at a later date. Meaning that yes, the player must leave the vault and search through the neighboring areas before getting this 10mm pistol, with the earliest opportunity of grabbing this item being that of level 7, as that's the only time you can get the second locksmith perk. I know this is asking a lot and I know it sounds ridiculous, but just think about it. The pipe weapons in Fallout 4 are honestly the most fitting weapons of the entire franchise. They have this really crude, homemade style about them that can truly only exist in a post-war apocalyptic setting. Sure, we could craft these items today, but that's highly illegal, and obtaining actually manufactured weapons is probably way easier to do. The existence of both pre-war and post-war weapons is a dynamic that truly does make sense, and I personally think it's one of the marks that Fallout 4 hits perfectly, where maybe the other 3D Fallout games don't. Because when it comes to the design of Fallout 4's weapons, you have this beautiful clash of shoddy, gross-looking items that are half-assedly put together, and then these perfectly machine-made tools of war that are ergonomically produced for combat. In my opinion, getting these shoddy, run-down items first can help with the game's pacing and balancing, as you expect these awfully made weapons to be less deadly than their counterparts. And sure, as you progress through the game and level up, these stronger and more objectively powerful items should become available to you, allowing the player to experience both sides of this clash that I mentioned. In a way, I'm echoing what I said at the start of the video, where most games will give you the worst item possible at the start of the game, so that you can truly experience what it's like to progress through the weapon types as you go along. Like in Fable, when you get the rusty iron longsword, sure, it's a good weapon, but it's by no means the best. And the iron longsword is arguably one of the worst weapons in the game. Fallout 4 doesn't do this, however, as it gives you a weapon that arguably should be kept away from the player for roughly 5 to 6, maybe 7 levels. The 10mm pistol is just too powerful. And I'm sure that a lot of people will probably disagree with this video entirely because they remember using a pipe weapon here and there and probably multiple times throughout a playthrough as they run out of ammo for the other main weapons that they have. However, the key argument I'm trying to make is that the pipe weapons don't get a chance to actually shine. They shouldn't have to be a secondary weapon type from the get-go. They should have a moment where they're the only weapons you choose. Because eventually you are going to find better weapons. Eventually you are going to move on to something better, and that's totally fine. But the pipe weapons specialize as being a starting weapon type, and you never use them from the start. It sucks, it really does. Like I said, these guns have a robust weaponsmith system with these clearly shit aiming sights that no one would want to use. But if the game forces you to use them, I mean, you have no choice. Yes, sure, it would make the combat at the beginning of the game a little bit worse, but doesn't that eventually make the weapons you find later in the game, the manufactured ones with perfect aiming sights or dot sights, just so much more rewarding? Eventually, you will move away from these terrible pipe weapons and you'll move on to better machine-made weapons that are basically built for war. What I'm trying to get at entirely with this video is that pipe weapons feel like they were added to the game to offer this early combat experience that's both uncomfortable but generally easy, as you first encounter enemies that really don't threaten your life. This is where these weapons should shine, in the broken hills of Sanctuary to the run-down outskirts of Cambridge. But the game doesn't do this. I mean, truly ask yourself, what weapon did you find yourself using for the first 4 to 6 hours of the game? And we both know the answer is probably either the 10mm pistol or the double-barrel shotgun, as they're both very strong weapons and are found within the first hour of playing the game. It just pains me that an entirely new set of weapons that fit the game better than almost anything else is just overlooked by what appears to be an attempt to streamline the combat much faster. I mean, we all know the combat of Fallout 4 is the best in the series. We all know that Fallout 4's combat is the strong point of the game itself. Like the Salt Factory once said, Fallout 4 is a good shooter, terrible RPG. And although I don't entirely agree with the second part of that sentiment, I do think that the combat and the shooting elements of this game is its strong point. And I can't help but feel that Bethesda felt this way too, and they decided to prioritize a weapon at the start of the game that they were familiar with. Like in Fallout 3, where they give you the 10mm pistol inside the vault, they did the exact same thing with Fallout 4. The key difference here though between Fallout 3 and Fallout 4 is 4 tried something new with the pipe weapons, and arguably actually managed to make it work really well. They just ruined it by giving you something better before you even got a chance to experience the pipe weapons, unknowingly making an entire genre of weapons obsolete. I know I can get a bit heavy at times with these retrospective rant videos, but I really do love the game of Fallout 4, and I think it's entirely healthy to speculate on the state of the game and what could or should have been. Obviously, at the end of the day, the game does not emphasize pipe weapons as much as I would love them to, and there's probably a good reason for it. Now, I have somewhat of a personal request of you, the person watching this. If you're ever doing a Fallout 4 playthrough again in the near future, genuinely try out a pipe weapon only run. Honestly, these weapons stay strong for way longer than you'd expect, and they can even be fitted out with some amazing technology. Eventually, you'll find a perfect legendary that fits your playstyle, and the game will become a breeze. If you want to watch me do a pipe weapon only playthrough myself, I will be streaming a Fallout 4 Survival pipe weapons only permadeath playthrough on my Twitch channel over at twitch.tv/Jabo, which should start the Tuesday that this video goes live. If you're watching this maybe a week after, there's probably a good chance that I'm still doing it, so hop on by. So I'll see you guys there, and to all the people watching, as always, more content to come, and I'll see you guys next time. Goodbye.